Thank you for tuning in to the Bibles in Schools podcast. Through Bibles in Schools, we've donated thousands of Bibles to public school libraries, juvenile detention centers, and educational facilities across the U.S. Let's open a new chapter and dive into today's episode. Hey, welcome back to another episode of Bibles in Schools. And I don't know if you've noticed, but I usually just always say, hey, because I was thinking about it today. My grandpa, we would always come into his house and he would always say that to like welcome us into his house. He'd always be like, hey. So I always say that because of him. So that's why I say it. And it's great because we have another librarian here today just to share all about how Bibles in Schools has impacted her school and community. So go ahead, Mrs. Villar, and introduce yourself and where you are.
Hi, my name is Brandy Villar, and I'm a librarian at a public school in Louisiana.
Awesome. And it was so cool because when we got your order, we were getting all these different orders from different parts of Louisiana. And so it was like, wow, this was last month in September. And it just felt like Louisiana was the state of the month because we donated a lot to your state, actually. But how did you hear about us?
I actually heard about you through a librarian's blog on Facebook. And somebody had blogged about it and said how wonderful it was and how the students were responding so positively. And that's something that I wanted for my library.
Yeah, that post was really cool because it got a lot of traction because all of a sudden it was overnight and we got orders from libraries all across the United States and we were like, what happened? Because usually we know if there's a connection, we know, why it's coming from that specific school, but we didn't know. And then we found out through the post. So I'm guessing that y'all check that librarian page often, or
I'm not one to get online very much, but when I do, that's usually where I go. And I happened to be on that day, and of course I believe it was divine, that I was on that day and I happened to see that. And what I did is once I ordered it, I shared that link with my fellow librarians because we PLC quite a bit and get together and talk about the latest and greatest things. And I was like, you guys have to check this out. It's wonderful. My students are positively responding. And I know that several of my librarian friends did that as well.
yes, you helped us because it's always the best when librarians share it with other librarians and tell them like, hey, you got to check this out because my students are loving this. And there are, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there are 29 schools in your district, and 6 of the schools responded to because you shared with them. And because of that, we have donated 78 Bibles and Christian books to schools in your county.
That's fantastic.
Yes. So, yeah. So what happened when you put the Bibles on your shelf?
So usually what I do when I get a new series of books, I'll highlight them and just kind of pick one up and go through it and briefly explain what it's about. And I have a certain section for graphic novels, so that's where the kids always go. So I put those right there with the rest of my books. And they were like, yo, look at this Bible. Look how cool. And they grabbed it off the shelf. And after that, there was a lot of kids that, were like, do you have any more? And I want one. And it just kind of spread like wildfire, which really warmed my heart because you just never know what's gonna be checked out and what's gonna be popular. And so through that, one of my students, our school goes to 5th grade. He's a 5th grader. Mm-hmm. He said, Miss Villar, he said, what happens if I don't turn this Action Bible back in? And I said, well, that wouldn't be very fair. Why would you not want to turn it back in? And he said, because I love it so much. He said, I want one for myself. And I said, well, the Christian thing to do is to turn it back in and, be honest. And I said, because you were honest with me and you shared with me how much you love this book, I said, I'm going to see what I can do for you to get you one. And then
Mhm.
that's when I contacted you, and you were so gracious to send that and then others to him. And when I gave him the book, he beamed from ear to ear. And I wrote a little message, personal message to him, because I do see a leader in this particular student. And I told him, I said, when you have those qualities, you can either lead in a good way or a bad way. And I said, take this book and let it speak to you so that you can be a light to those around you. And the next day, he came back to school and he had a wristband on that has when you tap your phone on it, it has a Bible verse.
Oh, cool.
And I didn't know anything about those. And he was like, Miss Villar, tap my bracelet. And I tapped it with my phone and it brought up a scripture. And I was like, wow, it's already starting. So that just warmed my heart.
Yeah, it's really cool when we get stories like that from y'all, because um we really just never know how much these Bibles are impacting these students and their families. And when they share with y'all, it's like a glimpse into a little bit of what these Bibles are doing and how they're making an impact. And we've gotten many requests from librarians who say, hey, can we have a personal Bible for a student, because they are loving it so much.
Yes.
And that's just amazing. And you just think about your books or your Bibles when you're kids, and when someone writes a little message in it, it means so much. Like, you remember that. And just for him to look back in that and to know that he had a teacher who believed in him, that he's a leader, and to make a positive impact, that's really cool.
That was my goal, is that if I can impact him and he can impact others, I feel like that's why we're all here. You
Yeah.
know, that's the purpose of us all.
Yeah. So, had you gotten any donations before that were books that had to deal with the Bible?
Have not. I hadn't even heard of it. My library is almost 100 years old.
Wow.
It was a high school at one point, a middle school, and now we're strictly primary. And so there was a lot of old books in here. And there was a Bible series from the 70s and 80s that I remember as a child, and they're still on the shelves. And I did notice that they get checked out quite a bit, even as old as they are.
That
And so I was not aware that there was a action Bible that was in the form of a graphic novel until that blog. And it just spoke to me, because I was like, if they're checking out those books that are that old, they have a thirst for this content. And so then when I contacted you, I just hoped for the best. You
yeah.
just never know what you're going to get, but y'all were so accommodating and true to your word and exactly what you said you were. And so when I got the books, I was so excited, and it turned out they were too. And so with your second shipment, what I did, because they're so popular, I took one of the action Bibles, and it's actually in a raffle. We're
Oh,
raffling
cool.
off. But in order to get the Bible, they have to follow the school rules and be an example. And I give them a ticket, and they write their name on it, and they drop it in a bucket. And at Christmas time, I'm gonna pull a ticket for the winner.
Oh,
So
they're gonna be so
they're
excited.
they're so excited. They're very excited.
Oh, wow. So
Yeah.
have you seen, I guess you've probably seen maybe their try, you know how kids are, they try to be a little better, because if you mention, well, remember the raffle, or remember the prizes.
Well, I actually have it set up on a table, and it's on a stand, and then right in front of it is the bucket with the tickets. And
Okay.
so as soon as they walk into the library, they see it, and when they walk out, they see it, and I don't have to say a word. And usually I'll see them, and they're like tapping their friend, like, if you want a ticket, you better follow the rules. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like wildfire, it's spreading. And so I just watch, and I'll pick up on that and say, he's right. If you want that ticket, remember what our rules are and what we're supposed to do and the actions we're supposed to take, just like what's in the Bible. So it has been a platform to, talk about the fruits of the spirit,
Yeah.
self-control, kindness, love. And, I don't push my Christianity on my students. I simply just try to be an example of that. And if they ask me a question about how I handle something or what they should do, I just say, well, what I do is when somebody is mean to me is I pray for them and I forgive them right away. And, I follow that self-control of not wanting to lash back out and, just following what the Bible actually says to do.
Yeah, so it's opened up conversations with your students because they're now talking about God because it's right there and they're kind of
Absolutely.
asking you questions about it.
It really has. And, also with that, I try to use my platform as just a space for love
Mhm.
because that is what we're here for, to love one another and share that. So, see them in the hall and I continue what happens in my library in the hallways. So I greet them in the mornings with, a hug and I love you. And, I just, I feel like it shouldn't be just contained. I think it should be shared and used as an example. And it certainly has been a platform to do that.
Yeah.
So thank you. Thank you so much for sending them. They've been a huge blessing to my
Well,
school
yeah, that's
and to
all.
me.
I want everybody to hear it because I thanks for sharing too how you had Christian books in your library that were 70s, 80s, and that's what we've have found a lot. And that's what I found. That's why I started this organization was because we had one King James Version Bible that was probably from the 70s as well. And I thought, okay, if my student wants to learn more by just reading a King James Version Bible that's hard to read,
It is.
what if we had a kids version of the Bible in our library? And that's when we really just saw um the Action Storybook Bible being circulated all through our school and the impact it was making. And so it's cool to hear now, we're donating to schools and we've donated to all 50 states. And then hearing your story, like you're in Louisiana and just how we've been going for 5 years and so you didn't know about us, so there are so many more schools to reach that have never heard about us. And we do really hope and pray that many people will see these podcasts in many schools and teachers and librarians, and they'll hear from you that the kids want them.
They do. They do want them. And I think that that is a misconception that they just want the popular books and it's not always what you think. And these kids surprise me on a daily basis, with how they think and how they feel. And you just never know. You never know.
Yes. And you never know what these kids are really going through. And a lot of times you can tell there's something going on, but to have a book and to have the Bible that brings truth and hope and joy and life, and like you were saying, teaches all about the fruits of the spirit and has such fun stories in them that grab students' attention. I mean, it's the best-selling book of all time.
Right? Right?
For a reason. And
Yes.
so, it's just really cool to be reminded as adults too, and to see these kids get so excited to read the Bible.
And it really is. And there were so when the books kind of hit the shelves, it's funny because they'll say, "Oh, I go to church," and they'll start talking about this, and it starts conversations amongst themselves, so that
Right.
they know, "Hey, there's a fellow Christian sitting right next to me, and I didn't even know it." And so, it opens up dialogue between them that they
Right.
can talk about. And that same student that won the book, a student was sitting across from him at the table. And he said, Miss Villar, can he come sit next to me so we can read this book together? And I said, absolutely. So
Oh,
he got up and he moved over and sat next to him. And so it's been a huge blessing. And I've watched, how it has transformed my library and my students. And I'm very grateful for the organization and for you stepping out to do this. So thank you.
well, we're glad to be in y'all's corner and in y'all's on y'all's bookshelves. And I see behind you is the cat in the hat.
Yes.
And we donate we donated these to your book wherever you go. I want you to know, which they're kind of like Dr. Seuss books,
I
but
have those on my shelf too.
yeah, do they like them? Have they
They
checked
do.
them out?
Well, I've had to read them because they
Okay.
are not sure what they are, but once I start reading them and they rhyme, they're like, it's like Dr. Seuss, and I'm like, yeah.
Yeah.
So they have enjoyed that book as well. Yes.
Oh, awesome. Well, in January, we'll be sending, all of our librarians that we've donated to, we are offering new books, and there's a second one that talks about his grace. And so it's part of the series. So you'll be getting that. So I think they'll like that one too. Because I know that series are so popular with students. They read one book, but then
Right.
and if they like it, then there's another one for them to read that's similar.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That's wonderful. I'm so glad to hear that it's continuing, that
Yes.
there are more books coming out. So
Yes.
keep me on the list for sure.
Okay, we will. And just any final thoughts before we end today's podcast?
Just, if I had to say anything to librarians out there, I would say don't be afraid to put these books on your shelves. These students have the same rights as other students to read books on Christianity. It's almost like become taboo to even talk about being a Christian, and it's just, you know, I just want them not to be afraid. Put it out there. You're not pushing an agenda. You're just offering, um, like every other author, every other book that's on your shelf, you're just offering it to students. So, because I did have that feedback from my librarian friends when I told them that this organization existed and what I was doing, and they were questioning. And I said, you have other books on your shelves that you may not necessarily agree with or align with your Christianity. So why would this be any different? You're not pushing those books or these books. You're just simply, offering them. So I would say don't be afraid. Just put it out there and, see what happens.
Yeah. I think for the most part, people will see all the smiles on the kids' faces.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes.
So thank you so much for sharing with your librarians. And, whenever there's another librarian group that you can think of to help us spread the message of Bibles in schools, or if you know other teachers or librarians in other districts, it really helps us to have that connection to get into the schools. And the fact that you're seeing the impact right in your library, that's a pretty powerful testimony right there. So just thank you so much. And thank you for offering these books to your students.
It's been a pleasure. It absolutely has. So thank you. I appreciate everything that you're doing, and I appreciate your courage for stepping out and, as an educator, stepping away from that to do this. So thank you so much.
Yes. We hope you have a good rest of the day.
All right. Thank you. I
Bye bye.
appreciate it. Thanks for having me.